Geographical indications. What are they and why do we have them? Prosciutto di Parma ham, Porto, Mozzarella di Bufala Campagna, Canadian whiskey, Quebec ice wine, Darjeeling tea, Bordeaux wine, Camembert de Normandie. These are all familiar, but there's much more to these product names than meets the eye. We consume these products because they reflect a particular quality and know-how. They are associated with a very specific terroir, region, even a single village. That is what makes them so unique. These products are extraordinary, and there's a way to protect them and value them more through protected geographical indications, or GIs. GIs define the distinctive characteristics of a product. 1. The producer's knowledge. 2. The manufacturing process. 3. Its geographical origin. 4. The climate. A geographical indication creates a strong link between quality and origin. It adds considerable value to a product. For producers, whose hard work and expertise are recognized and valued. For consumers, increasingly concerned with sustainability and quality of food. And for the market, where a product's reputation is an added value. European GI sales represented around 77 billion euros in 2019. Some 10,000 products around the world are protected through a GI, 3,200 of which come from Europe. Canada has a wide variety of protection regimes in place to certify the quality, traceability, and origin of its products. But at the federal level, only 26 Canadian products are currently officially certified as geographical indications, especially wine and liquor appellations. Only one is a food product, Mets Sucrés de Neuville from Quebec, and none protects a non-agricultural product yet. Some provinces have also implemented official provincial labels that protect the origin of the products within their jurisdiction. Among the most advanced provinces on GIs are Quebec and British Columbia. In the Atlantic provinces, for example, where some of the most iconic products in the country are produced, none have been officially certified as a GI, although they have created several quality lines or channels. Yet, the potential is huge, especially for seafood products, but also for beer, blueberries, or maple syrup, to name but a few. From coast to coast to coast, there are enormous opportunities for Canadian producers, especially in terms of exports to Europe, where the approach, recognized and well-established, brings a great added value to products. Canada and Europe have indeed signed a key agreement, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. It allows Canada to legally protect its GIs in Europe and vice versa. 170 geographical indications from various categories are protected under CETA. This system of mutual recognition is particularly important for producers and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. GIs not only create a new link between the consumer and what they consume, they also protect the unique traits of these products on domestic and international markets. For producers whose goods are inextricably linked to the terroir, GIs are a great lever for development and guarantee the traceability and certify the quality and origin of the products.
My name is Sylvain Charlebois. I am the director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, Halifax, Canada. Welcome to this second webinar entitled Geographical Identification from Farm to Table. What is the value add? And today we have a great panel joining us today, and this is a follow-up to last week's panel, which was moderated by my good friend Peter Chapman. Matthew, Marcia, and Martha joined Peter to talk more about GIs in general. Today, the webinar is going to be much more on how GIs can be applied in the real world. And so we are joined today by four great panelists who are actually doing the work, working with GIs. And what are GIs essentially? it's selling geography through food essentially, and my fellow panelists will be able to do a deep dive into their own business and explain how GIs are actually helping their business and how relevant GIs are to consumers in general. But before we go into a discussion with the group, I just want to go through a few housekeeping points. First of all, the panel is recorded. It will last about 45 minutes. There is translation. La traduction en français est disponible en audio. Seulement, suivez le lien présent sur le chat de l'événement sur votre écran. A Q&A session will actually follow the webinar, and we will have one breakout room, and the breakout room will facilitate an interactive discussion between our panelists and the group involved. And so join us right after the webinar to have a chat amongst ourselves. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. So we are very pleased to have 4 distinguished panelists joining us today. Our first panelist is actually from Norway, Ann-Karin Stabel, project manager of Torfisk fra Lofoten in Norway. Welcome, Ann-Karin. And I probably destroyed your name and the location, but I'm sure you'll be able to pronounce that properly later. We also have William Lavelle, head of drinks in Ireland, and he represents the Irish Whiskey Association in Ireland. Welcome, William. We also have François Pouliot from Verger Hemingford, Cidrerie Créative in Hemingford, Quebec, Canada. Welcome, François. And finally, we have Nicolas Brassard, Quality Export Manager, Groupement Quality Huîtres Marraine Oléron in France. So welcome, Nicolas, as well. So this session is really about giving a voice to people who are actually using GIs on a day-to-day basis. So all 4 of you do use GIs. And so I'd like to basically ask you about the pros and cons of actually using GIs in your business. And of course, I'll ask you to kind of explain what you do, what your business is all about before you go into the pros and cons very quickly. So I'll start with Ann-Karin. Now, Ann-Karin lives and works in the beautiful Lofoten Island in Norway. She has been promoting the region as a food region and food destination since 2007. Since 2014, she has been working with the Torfisk fra Lofoten, Stockfish from Lofoten, and she'll probably explain what that is. Last year, the company developed agreements and licenses in order to protect the stockfish in the European Union, as its main market is Italy. So, Ann-Karin, please explain to us what you do, and perhaps tell us what the pros and cons are of GIs for your business.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. Since Stockfish is a very small product, I would like to present it to you. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
This is what is protected. It's a dried cod. And as you see, it's not so much eatable as it is there, but I'll try to explain what it is. It's a cod that has been swimming from the Barents Sea to the Lofoten Islands, and it comes here to spawn in between January and April. It's a very fit and muscular fish, and it's comes here to make new babies. The production is, as you see, is small coastal boats coming in, delivering in this or the neighboring region. Then the fish is prepared and is hung outside in this region. I know that you have been talking about terroir, and here the terroir is the hanging season, and it hangs from about March till June, and then it's taken in, and it has then been through the wind and the sun and the snow and the rain, and that makes the product. And each year, each production year has a different quality as from another. And this is about the same as the wine producers. They watch the grapes during the growing, and the fish production is watched carefully, and it has to be looked after and seen when it has to be picked in. The fish is then stored, matured again, and then it's all the producers have the same standards, and it's only the best quality that gets the PGI for it. And it's a long history. It's from the Vikings. It's the same methods. It's without preservatives, and it's still an export today, the same way as the Vikings did 1,000 years ago. And the challenge for us is that this is the first PGI product in Norway. So we're making a lot of a new history here. Even though this is a very, very small product, seafood product globally, it's a cornerstone production locally. And the main market is Italy, and is actually one of the 5 national dishes in Italy. Last year, we certified Italian companies so that they could use the fish and use the label PGI on their products. And then it's 22 shareholders in this company within the region on the 6 islands and 6 municipalities. So it's something to handle.
That's great. I have a question about markets. So your main market is Italy. Have you tried to develop other markets through your GI initiative?
Yes. There are other markets as well. Croatia is big, and then United States. And then we have just recently seen that South Korea has dried fish as a main product themselves. And so we are looking at the process to go into South Korea with our product, with a PGI product.
Interesting. So in Korea, is it the same process as in Norway?
No, it's a little bit different, but they dry it on racks as we do, and they dry it in winter, but they have other qualities to it that we don't have. It's a little bit different, yes.
Right, okay.
But it's very interesting and very surprising that they had almost the same production as we did.
From far away, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, thank you very much for the explanation, Anne-Karin. Up next is William Lavelle. Now, William is the head of the Irish Whiskey Association. So for whiskey fans out there, he's your person. He's the head of the Irish Whiskey Association, the representative body of the Irish whiskey industry. Irish whiskey is one of the EU's leading spirits GI categories, and since 2017, Irish whiskey sales have grown 44% here in Canada. William is acting chairman of the International Trade Committee of Spirits Europe, the representative federation of the EU spirits industry. So, William, pros and cons, and of course, before, I'd like to know more about your business.
Thank you, Sylvain. So, Irish whiskey is the oldest whiskey in the world. Indeed, the name whiskey came from Ireland back in the 10th and 11th century. Monks would distill whiskey. They called it the water of life, or in the Irish language, Ishkabaha, which became anglicised to whiskey. And we're very proud to have exported that skill of whiskey making to Scotland and Canada and America. Now, despite we don't say we're better than any other whiskey, but because we've been making it longer than in any other nation, we, I suppose, make it differently. And we have our own attributes and our own depth and diversity to Irish whiskey. The industry was nearly wiped out in the 20th century. So what we've seen, particularly over the last decade, has been a phenomenal revival in global interest in Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey was officially the fastest growing global spirits category in the world between 2010 and 2020, with 140% growth. And actually, we had 280% growth in Canada over that same period. So I think sales have nearly quadrupled in 10 years.
Wow.
And we're very, very happy to see right across Canada, including in Atlantic Canada, really, great increase in sales of Irish whiskey. Since 2015, we have had a geographic indication, and that's been really important for us. And now, as I say, we're one of, along with cognac, we're the EU's two largest spirits categories, and we think our GI is really important in helping grow those exports, and has been particularly important over the last few years.
Interesting. The revival you mentioned, what's the main reason? What are the drivers getting people to drink whiskey?
I think there's been a number of factors. Like any business, I think we benefited from, I suppose, investment. So multinational companies who invested in the industry, as well as a new wave of emerging, Irish entrepreneurs who wanted to bring distilling back to their hometown. If you go back 100 years, we had 100 distilleries, but in the 1980s that had fallen to only 2. As of today, we're back up to 38. So we're seeing distilleries growing all over the country. But I think, on a broader, if you look around the world, there is a trend among consumers to brown spirits, to aged spirits, and Irish whiskey has just been in the right place at the right time to benefit from that. I've had the benefit over the last 3 years before this pandemic shut down all travel. I've had the pleasure of being in Canada and seeing how Irish whiskey has grown, and attending tastings and consumer events. And I think as I say, we've been lucky to benefit from a consumer trend to brown spirits, and the depth and diversity of our category protected by the GI is something that consumers are very interested in exploring.
That's great. The world, I think, owes a lot to the Irish, since you haven't kept all of the whiskey to yourselves. You've been able to share with the rest of the world, which is great. Up next, we're actually coming back to Canada, and we'll hear from François Pouliot. He's the creative and innovative cider maker, the owner of Verger Hemingford in Quebec, which is actually located not too far from my hometown of Farnham, Quebec. The estate was established in 1994 and has become known in Quebec and around the world as the cradle of ice cider. And I'm sure we'll know more about ice cider when we hear from François, under the name La Face Cachée de la Pomme, the hidden facade of the apple, I guess, if it's translated properly. François Pouliot has participated and collaborated in the development of 2 processes that were crucial to obtain the key characteristic of ice ciders of Quebec: Cri concentration, or cryo concentration. Sorry, François. I'm sure you'll explain all of that. And cryo extraction. So over to you, François.
Merci. Thank you, Sylvain, and welcome everyone. Yes, ice cider, cidre de glace du Québec, is not as old as the 2 other IGI that have been talking before me. It's only been 25 years since we make ice cider. It all began as a desire to make wine. I wanted to make wine, and to make wine you need the land. And I bought an old orchard, thinking of cutting all the trees and planting vine to make ice wine. But once I bought the orchard, the first year we thought, well, we're going to study the land, and we're going to think of our plan, and we'll cut the tree next year, and we'll think of it later for the vine. But since we had the orchard, we thought to, why don't we try to make ice wine with the apple? And with my mentor of the time, Christian Barthomeu, that is recognized as the inventor of the ice cider today, we tried to make the ice wine with the apple, and the result was so good. I thought, wow, well, instead of calling ice wine, we'll call it ice cider. And that began like this, as a fun hobby thing. And a couple of years later, around 2000, it became a lifetime project, and we've developed the category, and now we're about 60 producers in Quebec doing ice cider. Not everybody is GI yet. We've sold the ice cider in about 25 countries around the world. So the ice cider is mainly an ice wine made with apple, but the difference is to make ice wine with grape, you need -8, -10. To make ice cider, you need -20, 25 Celsius in the winter in order to concentrate the apple, the sugar in the apple, because the apple to begin is maybe half sweet to the grape, but in the end, the ice cider has the same value as ice wine. So you need extreme cold weather to concentrate the sugar in the fruit. That's why we can make this in Quebec. We have warm summer to grow the apple, but we have cold winter to concentrate the fruit and the sugar. Now we've developed the sugar and the fruit. So we developed two techniques. The first one is that we harvest the apple, because most of the apple do fall on the ground once they ripe. So we harvest the apple before they fall on the ground, so they're still good. We keep them in cold storage, just in a refrigerator, until about Christmas time. At that time, we squeeze the apple and we leave the juice outside for maybe a month or two. So what happened in the apple juice, you have water and sugar. Well, the water freezes, but not the sugar. So for a period of time, it freeze and freeze, and slowly the sugar extract itself from the water that is hard in ice.
Just for being outside like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we collect that must, that concentrated must is about maybe 20% of the original volume, and that goes fermenting for 6-8 months. It's a very slow fermentation. And then the other technique I developed is that because of the way I was growing apple, I didn't know anything about apple growing. I found some variety of apple that hangs on the tree once they're ripe. So we leave the apple on the trees until January. So there the apple is exposed to the wind, the cold, the sun. It freezes, but it also bakes. It cooks by the cold. And then when you harvest those apples, you squeeze them hard frozen, and you just get maybe 10% of yield of the juice that you would normally get with the fresh apple. And that juice is so tasteful. It's really, really, really good.
And that's the cryo extraction process. Right?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm just curious, is there a variety for these apples, like Corkland, Macintosh? What do you need for those processes?
Well, in the GI, you need to have like fall apple. You cannot use early apple. You can mix them. It will. So this is what is interesting. Every producer has different apple that we'll use. Obviously, to do cryo concentration, where you press the fresh apple. Well, mostly you're going to use a Macintosh, where you have a good yield of sugar, but you have a high acidity. But for apple that hangs on the tree, those are very special apple, like Fuji, Honey Gold, even one tree that we don't know, we call it Pouliot after my name, that we developed with an old tree that we never found the roots of that tree. And then today there's maybe 6-7 varieties of apple that hangs on the tree in the winter. But what's so funny, like 20 years ago, all my colleagues would say, hey, stop showing picture of apple trees in the winter. It's not possible. And now today you see apple in the trees in the winter everywhere here in Quebec. anyway.
You see, these webinars are great. You get to learn new varieties of apples. I had no clue that the Pouillet apple existed. So there you go.
Well, there's only some in my orchard.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a rarity, and that has value, of course. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Francois, and we'll dig more into the value and how your market sees your product. Obviously, it's grown so much from just a dream to 60 companies or 60 growers. It's just an amazing story. Now we're going back to Europe with Nicolas Brassard. Nicolas Brassard is director of the Groupement Qualité Huîtres Marraines Oléron. And I'm a big fan of oysters, by the way. Oysters of Marraines Oléron. And the director of the Association des producteurs de moules de filière Lavelle Rouge in France. He is also the head of the quality service of the Regional Committee of Shellfish Aquaculture of Charente-Maritime. He specializes in quality control and sustainable aquaculture and has been working in this sector for nearly 30 years. I'm looking forward to hear more about your business, Nicolas.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you also to be here today with you. It's a big fun for me, big challenge also. So I will try to be very short regarding the business. I'm sorry I have no presentation, but we produce under the GI Huîtres Marraines Oléron some Pacific oysters. And mainly oysters came from Canada and Japan, so from the 70s. So it's a big link with your country. And so these oysters, we farm them with a very special way, because we finish the process, in fact, in old salt marshes we called clair. And clair in French means clear. So the water is very clear. And during this specific process, we have some specific taste, some specific colors, many benefits of this old salt marshes. So it's quite a big business in France now, because as perhaps you know, France is the sixth country in farming, oyster farming in the world. So we produce around 100,000 tons of Pacific oyster in France. And under this PGI, we produce 20,000 tons. So it's quite a big activity. We have 220 companies. We export around 5% of the production. We sell in France 95% because we eat a lot of oyster in France, raw especially. And this way of production comes from 17th, 18th century. So from now, we are trying to keep this know-how, and GI is a very good point for that. And we try also to explain, and we want to keep it and to save the process, which is very specific. I think we are the only one in the world to finish oysters in all the salt marshes.
That's great story. We do have a lot of oyster farms here in the Atlantic, so I suspect that some people will want to know more about your story. So thank you very much, Nicolas. So I guess my other question to the panel is how difficult it was to establish your GI for your business. So perhaps I can go back to Anne-Karine and ask, so was it difficult, and what are the things that we need to keep in mind when you get to establish a GI?
Fish from Lofoten, Stockfish from Lofoten got the Norwegian PGI first in 2007. So there was made a lot of documents in that process. And then it takes time, of course.
How long did it take from the moment you decided to achieve GI to the moment you actually got it?
I don't remember. I'm sorry, but I can't tell.
It was that long.
This was previous to my job.
Yeah.
But I can tell that one of the reasons why they applied for it was that there were talks about establishing another ways of drying fish inside, and that would make a cheaper product, and you could do it in other methods. So this was a way of saving or protecting this production. So that was very, very important. And then it takes time, and the group got it. And I remember I was on one of the European meetings in Milan when it was an expo there, and they said, one of the different speakers said that you have to understand that everybody is not going to agree on everything. So you have to make compromises all the time. And 22 owners, they have different ideas of how their production is going into it. Some are making finished products, and some are just making the dried product. And this is the balance of what the company is going to do. So, and last year was the first time when we actually got to license it to Italian, what do you call it? They are buying the dried fish and make it into prepared or ready products for the Italian market. So it took 6 years to come that way. So everything takes time.
It took 6 years?
Yeah, to get to that process.
Wow, that's incredible. William, thoughts on obstacles, the challenges, establishing GIs?
The GI took a number of years in Ireland to agree and to draft. And I think at the heart of the GI is what was known as the technical file, or I think now in European law is known as the product specification. But this is the document that sets down the production practices that are permitted to qualify for GI status. I think the Irish industry, when there was a lot less producers when the technical file was first being produced, and they've done a really good job in putting together that technical file. But a number of years on, you have new producers who are beginning to question certain maybe assumptions and interpretations. So while it's really important that the document it respects traditionality, and it's a document that shouldn't be easily changed, I can now see in hindsight how, if we were doing it now, it would probably take much longer, because you do need to get that compromise. And the last thing I'd say is that it's really important that, because this is a legal document, because this defines how and what you can make, really important that you take your time and are diligent and make sure that, nothing is left out. Because we have ongoing, issues of interpretation, as to does it mean this or does it mean that? And you go back and you ask the people who drafted, say, we didn't think of this. So it is really important, I think, that you take the time, because it is worth having. I mean, and we can get on to that. The GI does give value, but it is underpinned, but you need the rules to underpin it. And I think it is worth taking time to get those rules and get that technical file put in place. It will stand to you.
Now, do you actually make changes often to protocols?
No, we haven't made any change to the technical file.
At all? Okay.
Not yet. There may be changes in the future. As of yet, we have not made any changes to the technical file. So the technical file, as was first adopted a number of years ago, is there and it stands. And I think it is important. It's a bit like the constitution of a country. It's not something you should be changing dramatically every year or so. It needs to stand. It needs to have a longevity to it. But at the same time, we shouldn't be afraid to, every so often look at it and see, are there issues which are causing challenges, or is it being interpreted in a way that wasn't initially envisaged?
That's great, William. François, thoughts on challenges?
Wow. Well, in the case of the ice cider here in Quebec, it took us 14 years to get an GI. Well, the first thing, we because you had not to battle, but you had to there were no GI or possibility before. So we had to demand the government to implement a law to create all the GI because it was not possible. So I read my history, and in 2000, in the year 2000 is the first time I wrote to the MAPAC, the Ministry of Agriculture, say, hey, we have a new thing here, and it'd be nice to protect it because we're starting to go through the export. And then on the other side,
and export markets were asking for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the culture in Canada, for those listening, there's not much of a culture around GIs in Canada except for Quebec.
Yeah,
where
now
Quebec there is now it's much more developed.
Exactly, because we created the law sur les appellations réservées, and then everything that goes around it, and so it took 14 years. We got the appellation, the GI, in December 2014, and then on the other side, you had to battle with all the other producers because everybody had their own ideas of how to make ice cider. And some people wanted to make it more easy, use a freezer or use this and that, and then so it was a lot of battle through it.
But by the time you got the GI, were you 60 producers already, or were you fewer people?
Well, now there's less producer than there were before because of all those battles. We lost a lot of players in the way. But I think it's still worth it today. Now we're regrouped under the association, and we get government funding to promote the category, which we couldn't do before. So that's good.
That's great.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so it protects a way of doing it. And now there's ice cider producer. In many places in the world. There's some guys in Denmark, in Norway, in Finland, in Germany, in France. They're not all true ice cider, but they're all inspired by what we've been doing in Quebec and somehow. So, yeah.
Okay. So are they going to be looking at establishing a GI in other countries as well? Is that what you're anticipating?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe a different way of doing it, yeah. But there's not many countries that has -25 and Apple in the same place in their country. So
that's right. Thank you, François. So Nicolas, challenges to establish GIs in your with mussels?
So it's a very long story. In fact, so this GI Marine oyster was already at the beginning a brand, collective brand, so which is possible in France. So this collective brand was born in 1974. So in 1974 until 1989 was reached, in fact, the first high quality standard produced. We call it Lavelle Rouge in France. So it's a French certification. So it was first in 89, then in 98 the second French certification, and then in 2009 the PGI recognized. And it was a long process because the recipe was changing. Many people were fighting, as always, to have some compromise. And finally, in 2009, we reached the PGI recognition.
Okay. Wow. So you have to be patient and committed.
Yes, but always. But the game is good because, as everybody said, that it's a way of protecting know-how in a specific territory. So if you don't do that, you will lose your past. You will forget something.
Your heritage, the legacy.
Yeah, heritage will disappear because a human has very short memory in general.
In anything, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have about 5-10 minutes left, but I want to really talk about the market and the consumer in particular, and because you've done a lot of work, you are dedicated to GIs. is it worth it from a marketing perspective? Anne-Karine?
Let me say first, if you don't think that you will use the PGI, then you shouldn't bother applying. Because it doesn't give a value before the customer sees the brand, the PGI, recognizes it as for what it is, protecting production and a geographical area and also quality. So if you're not going to, if you have customers who doesn't recognize it, it doesn't give the value to the customers. So that's very, very important.
Now, do you think that over time it has added market currency to your product? In other words, can you charge more to your customers just because you do have that work behind you? You're protecting that heritage for your product.
Yes, we know that. I know from another Norwegian PGI product here, lamb, they can charge until 25% more with the Norwegian PGI. And we have tried to ask the food chains in Italy to see if that's a possibility, and they say yes, up till about 25% more when you have the PGI on.
Wow, that's incredible. William, what about Irish whiskey?
Absolutely. And I don't think it's a case of whiskey producers wanting to necessarily charge more. There is a trend out there where consumers are willing to pay more for authentic product. Premiumization is a big trend right across consumer goods in developed markets, and spirits is no different. But if the consumer is going to pay more, they are more demanding in terms of wanting to be assured of the authenticity and indeed the uniqueness of that product. They want to know more about the backstory, how it was made, where it was made. And that's where the GI is invaluable. The geographic indication is our badge of honor. It's our guarantee to the consumer that this is an authentic, genuine product. So we see the GI going hand in hand with this global trend in premiumization. They both support each other, and the really strong growth that we have seen in Irish whiskey sales in Canada has particularly been driven at the premium levels. And as I say, our GI is really important in selling and promoting that.
That's great. François, in ice cider, is it the same?
Well, it's a bit, yes, in a way, but it's a bit different because when we got the GI, unfortunately, until now, it's not obligatory to apply to the GI. So right now in the market, there are some ice cider that are GI and some that are not GI. And a lot of the smaller producers, they say, oh, why should I bother to the problem and applying, because I'm just making 1,000 bottles and blah, blah, blah. So, but in maybe 2 years, this will, you will have to apply to the GI if you want to use the ice cider term. So, but for the time now, there are some GI and non-GI ice cider on the market. And it's hard to sometimes to see the difference between the two.
Right, and so, but if you're not in Hemingford or in Quebec, and you call it ice cider, is that still appropriate, or?
Yeah, well, yeah. If you're in France, let's say that I know there are some producer in France that call it ice cider. Is it real ice cider? But for sure, for us, when we arrive in the European market with our GI ice cider, then this is like the real stuff. So the bar is pretty high for the other guys to try to make something like we do.
For anyone who doesn't know much about ice cider, if I take a bottle that is GI versus a bottle that is not GI, can you tell the difference, or can you tell the difference?
Well, some yes, I can. if it's not a good quality. You can still make a good quality ice cider without GI, because before I was GI, it was the same. It was good.
Your product hasn't changed.
But no, the product hasn't changed, because the cahier des charges, the rule is pretty much what we've been developing for the past 25 years. So that hasn't changed. But the one who didn't make a good ice cider, well, either they're out of business today or they're still not making a good ice cider. But
But
so
that
that's why we
cahier
want to
is protected and valued by the
exactly. So in the future, I hope in 2 years, it's just like the government wants to give the chance to the one has not applied yet to sell their older product in order to be able to apply or not do any more cider. So hopefully in 2 years, everybody that make ice cider will have to have GI, or otherwise they will not be able to call it ice cider. So that's the next battle that we're fighting right now to get through.
That's right. Battles. You have to be really committed for sure. And I mean, in your case, you're dealing with a fairly new product compared to other panelists. It is fairly a new category, I guess. That's probably why you're dealing with some of these issues.
Yeah. It's nothing like my grandfather, or it's brand new. We're making history since the beginning.
That's right.
Since 20 years ago. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Nicolas, with mussel, so what are you seeing with the market? How do you market your product, and do GIs, or does your GI actually make an impact or make a difference when you're selling your product?
So from obtaining this GI and now, there is no so big difference. I mean, regarding the charge, it's almost the same, but we already divided this production in 4 parts, and in these 4 parts, 4 different categories of oyster, we sell from 1 to 2 to double. So depending on the quality, we have a different price, and the consumer can pay a lot to reach a very high standard. So it's important in France, and also what I said is that in France, Marraine Oléron oyster is 25% of the national production. So we are something as a leader, and we are the only one to reach official certification. So everybody, I mean professional, they look a lot at what we are doing and what is the strategy and what we want to do and how we want to do. But in general, I think GI is not made to improve the benefits,
the price.
but the price. But we have to find a good equilibrium between the costs and the sale. Because also, if you pay more such a product, it means that also it costs you more. You have to pay certification, you have to pay government, you have to pay Europe, you have to pay everybody. And only inspection cost is quite a lot, because, for example, for us, we check from the farm to the table. So it means that each step we have to check everything. Such a certification as GI, we have to check the recipe and we have to check the cake. Because if you follow the recipe, it doesn't mean you will have a cake. And if you have a cake, it doesn't mean that the recipe was checked. Okay? So this is the, I think it's a real way of producing, that you have to check recipe and you have to take the cake, which is totally different compared to a brand.
Yeah.
That's right, exactly. So in terms of audits, supply chain audits, can you give us an idea of cost? Just to give a sense to the viewers.
Yes, I have clearly the cost, because I also general manager, so I.
That's why I'm asking.
So, for example, INAO, so which represent government in France, we have to pay some euro per ton. So for 20,000 tons of Marraine-Orléans oysters, we will have to give to them around 30 to 40,000 euros first. After we have independent body, so we have an official certification body, and this certification body is around 100,000 euro. Yeah.
And that's a huge budget, yeah.
And then you have to add internal inspection. So I have a quality team of 5 persons all the year, so which represents around 150,000 euro a year. So if you had everything
overseeing all of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot.
So in terms of cost for everyone else, is that what we're looking at in terms of costs, or does it vary between cod and whiskey and cider? Is there a difference? Is that in terms of cost? Give us an idea.
In Irish whiskey, there is a verification program. So every year, any producer, so it could be a distillery or anyone else along the production phase, so maturing it or bottling it, has to go through a verification check by the authorities. And there is an annual fee, which is a flat fee. So it's a few €100. So it's not a major imposition. Of course, the reality is if you want to produce Irish whiskey, that's where the cost is, because the plant is very expensive. But then when you produce it, if you distill whiskey, you have to wait a minimum of 3 years before you can even sell a drop, because it's an aged product. So it is a very expensive business to get into, but the costs in relation to verification they're not excessive, no.
Mm-hmm. And Karine, François?
I would say similar. It's not exorbitant to apply. What costs more is to have an orchard and all the facilities to produce cider, but the rest is acceptable. Maybe $1,000, maybe $1,500,000. Not so bad.
Okay, per year.
Per year, yeah. Every year whoever is checking on us, they come and visit and check our apples and our cahier des charges and
that would be the Minister of Agriculture in Quebec, correct?
Well, it's like a certification bodies, like if you want to have a organic farm, you need to have a company that comes and say that you're okay. It's the same thing. They do the same. They do a organic farm and us ice cider.
Okay. Yeah. And Karine?
For the Stockfish, it's an annual fee for the producers, and it's about for how much they're producing. So the smaller producers pay less than the larger more.
So it's per volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and you have to have that in your back of your head or in the forehead, that this is going to cost. What we are doing now, we are not producing products that you can buy in the shops. So we have to certify Italians who do it. And so we are now developing this controls and inspection system. But the certified businesses, they have to pay a small amount right now, but we don't know really how much it's going to be in the future. But they see it as a value to have the brand. That's why they're going to be certified. So they can take the money when they get to the customers.
Mm-hmm.
I made just a calculation. So, for example, compared to the turnover of the producers, it's 0.3%, the cost of certification.
Okay. That's not too bad, and it's worthwhile. I mean,
yeah, I guess so.
You do invest, but there is a reward in the end. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and because we have to jump into our discussion. with participants. On behalf of the EU and Food and Beverage Atlantic, I want to thank all of you for participating in this webinar. I've learned a great deal. Obviously, I think everyone watching this will agree that you need to be committed to GIs because it's a lot of work. But in the end, it's worthwhile because you're not only marketing a product, a know-how, but you're also marketing a region. And you're allowing the rest of the world to better appreciate your own region, which is the concept of terroir, as Anne-Karine mentioned earlier. So I want to thank you very much for your knowledge and your participation this morning or today. So I guess we'll close this session and we'll go on to our discussion panel. Thank you very much.